In Norwegian, they call it Isdalen, the Ice Valley. Locals have another name for it, Death Valley. It's a desolate, rocky ravine on the slopes of Mount Ulriken, just outside Bergen, Norway's second-largest city. The terrain is treacherous, loose scree, steep drops, dense vegetation. This is not a place for casual hiking, and it's certainly not a place where you would expect to find a woman dressed for the city, burned beyond recognition, surrounded by objects that would launch one of the most perplexing investigations in European history. On November 29, 1970, a university professor and his two young daughters were hiking through Isdalen. The morning was cold, typical for late November in western Norway. As they carefully made their way along the rocky slope, they noticed something strange, a smell, acrid, chemical, completely out of place in the cold mountain air. Then they saw her. A woman's body lay among the rocks, partially hidden by a large boulder. She was lying on her back, positioned unnaturally, her head pointing downhill, as if she had been placed there deliberately. The entire front of her body was burned. Her face was destroyed, her hair almost completely gone, her skin charred black. The smell came from her body and from the smoldering remains of what appeared to be a small fire nearby. The professor immediately ushered his daughters away and went to alert the authorities. When police arrived and began examining the scene, they quickly realized this was no ordinary death. The positioning of the body, the items scattered around it, the deliberate burning, everything suggested something deeply strange had occurred in this remote valley. What they did not know, what no one would fully understand even more than 50 years later, was that they had stumbled upon the final chapter of a story involving multiple identities, international travel, Cold War espionage, and a woman who had gone to extraordinary lengths to erase every trace of who she really was. This is the true story of the Isdal Woman, and it does not begin with her death. It begins months earlier with a carefully constructed web of lies, disguises, and movements across Europe. In March of 1970, in Paris, a woman checked into a hotel. She was dark-haired, well-dressed, and spoke French with an accent that was difficult to place. She registered under the name Geneviève Lancier and provided an address in Brussels, an address that would later turn out not to exist. She stayed only briefly. She kept to herself, and then she left. Under normal circumstances, she would have been completely forgettable. Just another traveler in a city of millions. No one would have remembered her at all, if not for what would happen 8 months later. Throughout 1970, a woman moved through Norway like a ghost. She appeared in Oslo, Trondheim, Stavanger, and Bergen, staying in hotels, always alone, always under different names. She checked in using different passports. She told different stories about herself, different ages, different professions, different home addresses. The names she used were carefully chosen. They were all plausible, all vaguely European, but none of them were real. Geneviève Lancier, Claudia Tielt, Claudia Nielsen, Alexia Zarna Merches, Vera Jarl, Fenella Lork, Elizabeth Lienhauer, Vera Schlosseneck. She claimed to be Belgian, though her accent didn't quite match. Sometimes she said she was in her 20s or early 30s, though later analysis would suggest she was older, possibly in her 40s. She described herself as a saleswoman, a student, an antique dealer from South Africa. The details changed depending on who was asking. Hotel staff who encountered her remembered certain things clearly. She was fashionable, wearing expensive clothing and jewelry. She was serious, rarely smiling. She spoke multiple languages, French, German, Flemish, and some English, though not fluently. Kept to herself and often refused housekeeping, not wanting anyone to enter her room. And above all, she seemed perpetually on guard, as if she were watching for something or someone. In Stavanger, she visited a shoe store, Oscar Rørtvedt's footwear store, and bought a pair of rubber boots. At the time, the purchase seemed unremarkable, but the shopping bag from that store would later become one of the few physical traces linking her movements to real locations. When police eventually pieced together her travels, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. She moved constantly, never staying in one place for more than a few days. She backtracked, returning to cities she had already visited. She used different hotels within the same city and never returned to the same establishment twice. Most telling of all, she appeared to be documenting her own movements. In a small notepad later found among her belongings, she had written cryptic combinations of letters and numbers. When investigators decoded them, they appeared to correspond to dates and locations. It was a travel log, but written in a form only she could easily understand. This was not the behavior of a tourist. This was the behavior of someone who did not want to be followed, or someone who was following others. This was the behavior of a person living multiple lives at once, carefully separating them, maintaining strict operational security. This was the behavior of a spy. In late November of 1970, the woman arrived in Bergen for what would be the final chapter of her life. On November 23rd, she checked into the Hotel Horteheimen under the name Vera Jarl. She was assigned room 407. Hotel staff later recalled that she seemed even more withdrawn than usual during this stay. She spent long periods inside her room. When she did leave, she appeared tense and alert, frequently glancing over her shoulder as if she believed she was being watched. At one point, a hotel employee noticed something unusual. The woman had marked her hotel room door in a subtle, almost invisible way. To a casual observer, it meant nothing, but to someone trained to look for it, it could serve as a signal, a way to detect whether someone had entered the room in her absence. Was she signaling to someone? Or was she checking for intruders? No one could say. Later that same day, she checked out of the hotel. She called a taxi. The driver who picked her up would later report that she appeared nervous and agitated during the ride. She said very little. When the taxi stopped, she paid, took a small bag, and walked away. That was the last confirmed sighting of the Isdal Woman alive. Or at least, the last confirmed sighting recorded officially. There was one other encounter, one that would haunt a witness for decades. On November 24, 1970, a 26-year-old man was hiking near Isdalen. It was late afternoon, and the daylight was already fading. In Norway at that time of year, darkness comes early. He was alone on the trail when he noticed something strange. Ahead of him was a woman walking through the rugged terrain. She was dressed completely wrong for hiking. Stylish city clothing, impractical shoes, nothing suited for the cold, rocky slopes. She was moving quickly, almost hurriedly, and she kept turning her head to look behind her. Then he saw them. About 50 meters behind the woman were two men. They wore dark coats and moved with purpose. They did not look like hikers. Their attention seemed fixed on the woman ahead of them. The young man slowed to a stop. Should he intervene? Should he call out? For a brief moment, the woman's eyes met his. Years later, he would describe her expression as one of fear and resignation, as if she wanted to say something, but knew she couldn't. Then they passed him. The woman hurried ahead, disappearing into the forest and rocks. The two men followed shortly after. The man stood there, frozen, uncertain what he had just witnessed. Eventually, he continued his hike. 5 days later, news broke about a burned body found in Isdal. The man immediately recognized the location. He went to the police and told them what he had seen. A woman fleeing through the mountains, followed by two men, just days before the body was discovered. The officer listened, and then gave him advice that would become one of the most disturbing details of the entire case. "Forget about it," the officer said. "This case will never be solved." The man's testimony was never officially recorded. For decades, his account existed only in his memory and in the suspicions of those who believed the investigation had been incomplete or deliberately shut down. When police examined the site where the body had been found, the scene looked less like an accident and more like a carefully arranged tableau. The woman lay on her back, her head pointing downhill. The position was unnatural. The entire front of her body was burned, her face destroyed, her hair almost completely gone. Forensic investigator Tormod Bones would later describe the scene as having a ritualistic quality, as if the objects had been placed deliberately, not scattered randomly. Near the body were the remains of a small fire. It had burned hot but briefly. Analysis suggested it had been fueled by more than just wood, possibly gasoline or another accelerant. Scattered around the body in a specific pattern were several items. 2 plastic bottles, completely melted, that had contained something flammable. A partially burned passport, too damaged to read. An empty liquor bottle. Several pieces of jewelry, rings and a watch. A pair of rubber boots, partially burned nylon stockings, and an umbrella. Every item was stripped of identifying information. Labels were removed. The watch had its serial number filed off. Clothing tags were carefully cut away. Whoever this woman was, someone had gone to great lengths to ensure she could not be traced. She was wearing clothing when she died, though much of it was burned. What remained showed quality, expensive fabrics, well made. And like everything else, all identifying labels had been meticulously removed. The autopsy would only deepen the mystery. The woman was approximately 164 centimeters tall, about 5'4". She had a slim, athletic build, dark brown hair, brown eyes. Her age was initially estimated at 25 to 35, but later examination of her teeth would suggest something very different. She was likely between 40 and 50 years old. Her dental work was extensive, 14 fillings, several gold crowns. This type of dental work was unusual for Norway at the time. Gold dental restorations were more common in Eastern Europe and parts of Asia. Years later, isotope analysis of her teeth would reveal even more. Isotopes from food and water are absorbed into tooth enamel as it forms, creating a chemical record of where a person spent their childhood. Analysis suggested that the woman had grown up near Nuremberg, Germany, close to the French-German border. Around age 14, she likely moved to France. Her childhood appeared to have been spent in a region shaped by war, displacement, and shifting borders, areas deeply affected by World War II and its aftermath. The cause of death raised even more questions. She had died from a combination of factors: carbon monoxide poisoning from smoke inhalation, ingestion of approximately 50 to 70 sleeping pills, and burns sustained while she was still alive, confirmed by soot found in her lungs. She also had a large bruise on her neck, possibly from a fall. The official conclusion was probable suicide. According to this theory, she had taken the pills, arranged herself in the valley, and set herself on fire. but almost no one found this explanation convincing. People who self-immolate typically curl into a fetal position as their muscles contract from heat. She was lying flat on her back. 50 to 70 sleeping pills is an enormous dose. She would likely have been unconscious or barely conscious. How could she then gather materials, build a fire, and ignite it? Why arrange objects around her body? Why bring an umbrella? Why wear rubber boots? And what about the bruise on her neck? Most troubling of all, what about the witness who saw her being followed? If she intended to end her life, why was she running from two men in the mountains days earlier? The conclusion of probable suicide felt less like an answer and more like a way to close a case that refused to make sense. 3 days after the body was discovered, police received an unexpected lead. Someone reported abandoned luggage at the Bergen railway station. 2 suitcases had been left inside a locker and remained unclaimed for several days. When police opened them, they found what would become one of the most important collections of evidence in the entire case. Inside the suitcases was a carefully curated life, and just as carefully erased. There were multiple outfits, all fashionable and expensive. Dresses, blouses, coats. Every single item had its labels removed, not torn away casually, but carefully cut out. Even the size tags were gone. The clothing suggested wealth, taste, and intention, but offered no clues about where the items had been purchased. There were several wigs inside the suitcases. Different styles, different colors, blonde, brunette, short, long. This suggested disguise, an ability to alter her appearance quickly and convincingly. Cosmetics and personal care items were also present. Makeup, creams, hygiene products. Again, all labels removed. One item stood out, a tube of eczema cream. The prescription label had been scraped off, but faint traces remained. Investigators were able to determine it came from a pharmacy in Geneva, Switzerland. This placed the woman in yet another country. Money was found in several currencies: Norwegian kroner, German marks, Swiss francs, British pounds, and Belgian francs. She carried cash from across Europe, something useful for frequent international travel, or for someone who needed to operate without drawing attention. There were maps and travel documents, train schedules, city maps, timetables. This was someone constantly on the move, planning routes, watching schedules. 2 pairs of glasses were found, 1 pair of regular glasses and 1 pair of sunglasses. Neither appeared to be prescription lenses, suggesting they may have been used as part of her disguises. On the sunglasses, police found a partial fingerprint that matched the body found in Isdalen, confirming the suitcases belonged to the same woman. There was also the shopping bag from Oscar Rørtvedt's footwear store in Stavanger, linking her directly to the purchase of the rubber boots found at the scene. And then there was the notepad, a small notebook filled with handwritten symbols, letters and numbers arranged in a way that appeared meaningless at first glance. Police cryptographers eventually cracked it. It wasn't a complex cipher, but a personal shorthand. Each entry corresponded to a date and a location. It was a travel log. The decoded notes showed that she had crisscrossed Norway repeatedly. She visited Oslo, Bergen, Stavanger, and Trondheim multiple times, sometimes returning to the same city within days. Other times, she stayed away for weeks before coming back. This was not the pattern of a tourist. This was not even the pattern of a business traveler. It was the pattern of someone conducting surveillance, meeting contacts, or carrying out tasks that required precise timing and specific locations. And there was something else missing. Police knew she must have presented passports when checking into hotels. at least 8 different fake passports, corresponding to the names she used. But no passports were found. Not in the suitcases, not at the death scene, not anywhere. Had she destroyed them herself? Or had someone else taken them? Also missing were photographs. Despite carrying wigs, makeup, and multiple identities, there were no personal photos. No pictures of family, no pictures of friends, not even a casual snapshot. If she had ever carried such photos, they were gone. The investigation that followed appeared thorough on the surface. Nearly 100 witnesses were interviewed. Descriptions and sketches were distributed. Police contacted hotels across Norway and reached out to agencies in other countries. But beneath the surface, something felt wrong. Despite the unanswered questions, the case was officially closed in January of 1971, less than 2 months after the body was discovered. The verdict remained probable suicide. For a case involving an unidentified woman, fake passports, foreign travel, coded notes, and an eyewitness account of pursuit, the closure was remarkably fast. Years later, journalists who revisited the case spoke with the families of some of the original investigators. Several revealed that their relatives had been frustrated by the rushed conclusion. Some officers believed there was more to uncover, but were told to move on. Some suspected the case had larger implications that made it politically sensitive. The eyewitness who reported seeing the woman followed by 2 men was never officially documented. His statement disappeared into silence. Another detail stood out. The woman was buried in a zinc coffin. This type of coffin is designed to preserve remains for long periods of time. It is typically used when authorities believe a body may need to be exhumed and re-examined in the future. It was an unusual choice for a presumed suicide. She was buried in Møllendal Cemetery in Bergen. Her grave was marked not with a name, but with a number. No identity, no dates, just a reference to a case. Even in death, she remained anonymous. Decades later, it emerged that while the public police investigation had been closed, another investigation had continued quietly in the background. Norwegian intelligence services, the security police responsible for counter-espionage, had opened their own file on the Isdal Woman. Why? What did they know that wasn't shared publicly? That intelligence file has never been fully released. Portions remain classified to this day. The rushed closure, the dismissed witness, the sealed intelligence records. Together, they suggested something investigators could not ignore: the possibility of a cover-up. In 1970, the Cold War was at its height. Norway occupied a critical strategic position. Its long coastline bordered the Soviet Union. Its ports opened into the North Atlantic. Its airspace was valuable for surveillance. Both NATO and the Warsaw Pact considered Norway vital ground. Bergen, where the woman spent her final days, was particularly important. Nearby was Håkonsvern, Norway's main naval base. At the time, Norway was testing a new anti-ship missile system known as the Penguin missile. This was cutting-edge technology, a weapon capable of being launched from small patrol boats to threaten much larger vessels. Both NATO allies and Soviet intelligence wanted information about it. Norwegian counterintelligence later confirmed that they knew Soviet spies were active in the Bergen area during this period, attempting to gather intelligence on naval systems. Everything about the Isdal Woman fit the profile of an intelligence operative. She used multiple identities and high-quality fake passports. She practiced counter-surveillance techniques. She spoke multiple languages fluently. She altered her appearance with wigs and clothing, She obsessively removed identifying information. She traveled internationally with access to funds and resources. If she was a spy, the question became unavoidable. Which side was she on? If the Isdal woman was a spy, then the next question was unavoidable. Who did she work for? Some investigators believed she was connected to Eastern Bloc intelligence, possibly East Germany's Stasi, or the Soviet KGB. The dental work found during the autopsy pointed toward Eastern or Central Europe. The style of gold crowns and fillings was uncommon in Scandinavia and more typical in Eastern Europe and parts of Asia. Her childhood isotope profile placed her near the French-German border, a region deeply affected by World War II, shifting borders, and Cold War intelligence recruitment. Others argued she worked for Western intelligence. The fake Belgian passports, her frequent travel through France and Switzerland, and her apparent access to Western Europe suggested possible ties to agencies like West Germany's BND, France's SDECE, or even NATO-linked intelligence networks. Then there was a third possibility, the most dangerous of all. She may have been a double agent. Double agents live in constant peril, trusted by no one, watched by everyone. If exposed by either side, they are disposable. Their deaths are often quiet, deniable, and made to look like something else. If the Isdal woman had been exposed, if someone realized she was playing both sides, her death in a remote Norwegian valley, staged to resemble suicide, would make terrifying sense. In 2019, a new development added weight to this theory. Swiss journalist Yves Steiner uncovered a possible connection between the Isdal woman and François Genoux, a notorious Swiss banker with a dark history. Genoux had managed money for high-ranking Nazi officials after World War II and later became involved in funding extremist and terrorist organizations. By 1970, he was deeply connected to arms deals and Middle Eastern militant groups. Records showed that in late June of 1970, Genoux was in Beirut, meeting with key figures in Palestinian militant organizations. And so was the Isdal woman. The timing was exact. No proof exists that they met, but the coincidence was too precise to ignore. If she had been involved in arms financing, intelligence brokerage, or covert negotiations, it would explain her access to money, her international travel, and the extreme measures taken to conceal her identity. It would also explain why authorities may have wanted the case closed quickly. If her death intersected with intelligence operations, counterterrorism, or international diplomacy, the truth may have been deemed too sensitive to pursue publicly. Still, not everyone accepts the spy theory. Other explanations have been proposed. One theory suggests she was a high-level international criminal, a courier, smuggler, or operative for organized crime. Criminal networks can produce fake passports, move money across borders, and enforce silence violently. This theory explains some aspects of her life, but not why Norwegian intelligence would open a classified file. Another theory proposes she was a high-end escort. Her frequent travel, expensive clothing, anonymity, and meetings with men in hotels could support this idea. Some researchers believe she may have been killed by a client, with the scene staged to resemble suicide. But again, this doesn't explain the tradecraft, the intelligence interest, or the witness who saw her being followed. There is also a psychiatric theory that she suffered from severe mental illness, perhaps paranoid schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder. This could explain multiple identities, extreme secrecy, and eventual suicide. But this theory struggles to explain how she obtained sophisticated fake passports, traveled internationally with large sums of money, and attracted the attention of intelligence services. Another possibility is that she was fleeing someone, an abusive relationship, a criminal threat, or a personal danger. The multiple identities and constant movement could have been attempts to stay hidden. Her death could have been the tragic end of a long escape. But again, this theory doesn't fully explain the spy-like behavior. For decades, the case remained closed. Then, in 2016, Norwegian broadcaster NRK reopened the investigation. Journalist Marit Higraff, along with BBC journalist Neil McCarthy, launched a comprehensive re-examination of the case using modern forensic science and investigative techniques. The body was exhumed. The zinc coffin had preserved the remains remarkably well. Scientists extracted DNA and created a full genetic profile of the Isdal Woman for the first time. The DNA was submitted to databases across Europe. There were no matches, no relatives, no criminal records, no known identity. However, the DNA revealed something important. Her maternal haplogroup suggested Eastern or Central European ancestry, consistent with earlier isotope findings. Isotope analysis of her teeth and bones confirmed she likely grew up near Nuremberg, Germany, and later moved to France during adolescence. This narrowed the search, but not enough. Germany and France in the 1930s and 1940s were chaotic. War, displacement, destroyed records, lost families. Millions of people vanished into history. Finding one woman among them remained nearly impossible. NRK and the BBC produced the podcast Death in Ice Valley, bringing global attention back to the case. Thousands of listeners began investigating on their own. New witnesses came forward. One man from Forbach, France, claimed he had a brief relationship with the Isdal Woman in the summer of 1970. He described her as intelligent, secretive, multilingual, and evasive about her past. He suspected even then that she was involved in something dangerous. Most remarkably, he had a photograph, a picture of her riding a horse. For the first time, the world saw the Isdal Woman alive, not reconstructed, not imagined, but real, confident, composed, human. And still, no one recognized her. In 2017, Interpol issued a new international notice, distributing DNA data, sketches, and all known information to police agencies in over 190 countries. Nothing. No identification. No answers. More than 50 years later, the questions remain. Who was she really? Why was she in Norway? Who were the two men following her? Where did the passports go? Was her death suicide, murder, or something in between? And what does Norwegian intelligence still know that hasn't been released? The Isdal Woman lies buried in Bergen, still unnamed. A woman who erased herself so completely that even death could not reveal her identity. She wanted to be invisible. Instead, she became one of Europe's greatest mysteries. In many unsolved cases, time erodes the mystery. Witnesses die, evidence degrades, memories fade. But in the case of the Isdal Woman, time has done the opposite. With every decade, the mystery has only grown deeper. New forensic tools have eliminated possibilities rather than confirmed them. DNA narrowed her origins, but not her name. Isotope analysis traced her childhood, but not her life. Intelligence files hinted at secrets, but never revealed them. And perhaps that is the most unsettling part of all. This is not a case where investigators failed to look. It is a case where someone succeeded completely in disappearing. The Isdal Woman didn't simply lack identification. She actively destroyed it. Clothing labels removed, passports gone, personal photographs erased, names discarded like costumes. Even her death appeared designed to leave no clear conclusion: suicide or murder, spy or civilian, victim or operative. Every answer leads to another question. Some believe the truth is still locked away in classified archives, sealed not because the case is old, but because it still matters. Intelligence agencies rarely release information that could expose past operations, methods, or allies. Even decades later, secrets remain secrets. Others believe the answer lies with an ordinary family somewhere in Europe. People who lost a sister, a daughter, or an aunt during the chaos of the post-war years and never knew what became of her. A woman who left home, changed her name, and vanished forever. It's also possible that no one ever looked for her. If she truly erased her past, if she severed every tie, then her disappearance may have gone unnoticed. No missing persons report, no investigation, just an absence that slowly became accepted. And then there is the possibility she intended it this way, that anonymity was her final mission. Some operatives are trained to leave nothing behind, no identity, no trace, no legacy. They exist only as long as they are useful, and when they are not, they are erased. If that is the case, then the Isdal woman succeeded beyond measure. Even in death, she controlled the narrative. But despite all her efforts, one thing went wrong. She was found. A random hike, a passing smell, a moment of curiosity. If not for that chance encounter in a remote Norwegian valley, she would have vanished completely. Another unrecorded death in the wilderness. Instead, she became immortal. Her story continues to haunt investigators, journalists, historians, and listeners around the world, not because of what we know, but because of what we don't. The Isdal woman reminds us that even in a world of records, surveillance, and documentation, it is still possible for someone to disappear entirely, to live without a name, to die without an identity, to leave behind only questions. And perhaps that is why this case endures, because deep down, it touches something unsettling. The idea that a person can walk through history unseen, and that no matter how hard we look, some truths may never be uncovered. Some secrets are meant to die with the people who keep them. And somewhere in the quiet of Mullendal Cemetery in Bergen, beneath a simple marker with no name, lies a woman who took her truth with her forever.